Welcome to the Gunblade Guys YouTube channel and the Hero with 1,000 Potions podcast mashed together into one place. I'm Nate and I am joined by
your co-host Tyler,
and we are bringing our podcast episodes from 2022 to YouTube so that we can host them forever on this wonderful video site. You can still watch Rebecca Black's Friday from 10 years ago to this day. So we're hoping in 10 years you'll be able to watch our Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition analysis / reaction / smack talking series. But with that, there's a few things that we'd like to discuss first before we jump into the podcast.
So why Xenoblade Chronicles? Well, Nate and I have a shared interest in the Xeno series. You've heard of maybe Xenogears, Xeno Saga, and of course, probably most popular the Xenoblade series. Well, Nate and I have a very, very strong connection to Xenogears, and Nate's played some of the Xeno Saga series. And so when we talked about what game do we want to discuss in our long-form book club-like episodes, Xenoblade seemed like one of the more obvious answers because it taps into our interest in the existing Xeno series. Also, we've never played Xenoblade before or any of its sequels. This is a blind playthrough, that's worth mentioning, and so strictly our unadulterated reactions and opinions and analyses of gameplay, storytelling, music, combat, scenes, and everything in between. It was a spectacular journey, 29 episodes altogether. Can't wait to share with everybody on YouTube now.
Yep, I had no idea what was going to happen. I will be very wrong in some of my theories and speculations. But the most important thing is I had a ton of fun doing it. So that is something we want to share with you all here as well. What I'll preface some of the first episodes you're about to hear with is that when we started this was just a fun little experiment between us. We had never done podcasting, audio production, editing. We had no real tech other than gaming headsets. So our first recordings were pretty rough. We recorded on a single channel over Discord and we're at the mercy of all of its peculiarities. And so that was definitely a hurdle we had to get over. And it took us maybe 2, 3, 4 episodes to iron some of those out. And gradually we find our legs. We start moving at a better pace and we upgrade some of our gear. We pick up some tricks. We start having a little bit more fun with it, throwing in some gags and audio jokes and things like that. And we also, again, fall flat on our face halfway through the series when a audio file gets lost or something gets corrupted for no reason or a track is missing. And then Tyler sounds like he's inside a tin can again, or me. I think there was at one point I called myself the Gain Lord because I just sounded like I was eating my mic alive and there was nothing we could do about it other than re-record it or leave it as is. So we hope you bear with us on some of those. It will get better after the first few episodes. It will get worse and then it'll come back and be better again. So we hope it's for you, it's about the content and not the quality of two randos trying to play with the big boys here.
All right, but let's get into what this game is all about. So Xenoblade Chronicles, developed by Monolith Soft, a Japanese game development studio founded in 1999 by Tetsuya Takahashi, who would go on to become a writer and creator of Xenoblade Chronicles. Now, since Takahashi plays such a prominent role in the development of this game, it's worth talking about his work history. In the 1990s, Takahashi was a graphic designer for Squaresoft before they became Square Enix, and he's got his name on some of Squaresoft's most famous titles in the early 90s, including Final Fantasy V, Final Fantasy VI, and Chrono Trigger. If you like that moment in the first few minutes of Final Fantasy VI with the Magitech armors marching through the snow, you have Takahashi to thank for that.
Amazing.
Yeah. In the late 1990s, he was director of Xenogears, a Squaresoft RPG published in 1998 that would go on to become one of the greatest cult classics in all video game history, and Nate and I are colossal fans of Xenogears. That is going to become very, very apparent in our Xenoblade coverage.
Yeah, and it was the first RPG to have a fully 3D camera that he could pan around and act like a cinematic director of. It was amazing.
And there's so much more. We can't go on too long about it, but there's the themes involved, the sprawling story, the huge moments and twists, and a plot that goes on a couple millennia in scope is just astonishing. I'd never played a game like that before. But the story doesn't end there. After Xenogears, Takahashi split from Square and formed Monolith Soft to produce a Xenogears adjacent JRPG series called Xenosaga, and would go on to publish 3 games in that series from 2002 to 2006. Monolith Soft also developed the Bates and Kaitos series during those years as well. In 2010, Monolith Soft published another Xenogears adjacent game called Xenoblade Chronicles, first published in Japan in 2010, Europe and Australia in 2011, and finally in North America in 2012. Then in 2020, an expanded version came out worldwide on the Nintendo Switch called Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition, which includes remastered music, a more intuitive interface, quality of life improvements, and a post-epilogue chapter of the game not featured in the original, called Future Connected, set 1 year after the events of the main game. It is Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition that Nate and I played through in this series of 29 episodes covering Xenoblade Chronicles.
We had a blast, and this game consumed an entire year of ours as we slowly, methodically, note-takingly analyzed every inch of it. Maybe not every inch, but every inch that our puny human brains could possibly digest in our various sessions.
In hindsight, it was insanity.
Yeah, but it was a good insanity. It was a project that I love having bearing down, looming over me at every turn of my life. So the last thing I'll say as we get ready to put this on YouTube is that I'm going to be adding video footage of my new Game Plus playthrough with a light editing touch, because I originally did not capture any footage when we were working through the podcast. We were audio only. So if things line up, great, but don't expect the footage to always make complete sense with what you're seeing and what you're hearing. My goal is to just have something on the screen for you to look at that generally gives you the setting and the action of what we're talking about in a general sense, instead of just listening to someone talk over a JPEG, because we know how terrible it is to have a game just be a man talking on top of a JPEG.
Now that's a Disc 2 zinger.
Exactly. Hopefully you have a good time. If you love it, give us a like, stay tuned, subscribe. We'll be making a playlist just for these videos. With that, we're glad to have you. Check out our Discord. Warning, our Discord is living in a post-completed game universe. So if you're playing the game fresh and blind with us on YouTube, we might be talking about subject matter that is related to having already finished the game on our Discord. So you might want to wait till you're done to join us. But if you've played the game before, feel free to hop in and share your hot takes with us. And as always, thanks for watching and listening. Transition.
So let's talk about the title screen. What is it trying to tell us? So we've got, when we turn it on, there's a funny looking red sword dug into a green field of grass, waving softly in the wind, and a beautiful blue sky. It's very vibrant, these colors are. And as someone who's played Xenogears, that title screen, it's got the hard red X, the Xenogears, yeah, and very metal. I don't know if I mean like heavy metal, but like it's technological in its stylishness.
Yes.
But Xenoblade is presenting something very natural, very open world. This came out before Breath of the Wild, so
I was gonna mention that. Yeah.
Oh, did you? Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Just that site, I don't know if it's a video game thing or if it does it in all medium, but when I see a big open grassy field, that lends me to think exploration, openness. I just think back to whether it was the Super Nintendo RPGs or getting more into Final Fantasy X. There's a lot of areas where when you see a big open grassy field, you know, I'm going to be able to run around here here and do some fun stuff and take on some extra activities. That's just kind of a staple. So for a video game to start with that, I knew some stuff about this game leading up to the fact that it's been out for years and I've heard other people talk about it, but immediately that hits me as this game is going to offer me freedom, the ability to kind of get out there and explore a little bit. And set against the image of the sword seems like the name of the title, and that I guess you could kind of infer that it's the sword, but like you said, it looks pretty goofy. But with the title there, I think that's it's just making a clear statement, like this thing is going to be the focal point or the center of events of this game. That imagery, I don't know if Takahashi, the director of the Xeno games through Gears, Saga, and Blade, I don't know if he works with a single art director or works with the same people throughout all the years. Like, for example, Hideo Kojima for Metal Gear, all the way to recently he made Death Stranding. The art for those games is done by Yoji Shinkawa. He has a very signature style. So when I look at that sword in Xenoblade, I am brought back to several of the, I don't know if you'd call them the Gazel Ministry or just like the founders. The first generation technology in Xenogears is highly advanced, and then the generations after have kind of adapted this steampunk vibe to them.
Right.
Xenoblade gave me this feeling of a highly advanced, almost like a progenitor race feeling to it. Not because of what I knew about Xenoblade as a game, but what I knew about the art direction of Takahashi's games. If he's weaving kind of a similar thread through his stories, as I've experienced through Gears, Saga, and now Blade, I'm going to imagine that this sword is ancient and not something made by the world, this universe's Tony Stark, for example.
Sure.
That's what I was first drawn to, feelings-wise.
Yeah, it's quite a stark contrast from the beautiful blue sky and green grass there. It's kind of like a splinter in the setting. It's this shock of red, and it doesn't look like a sword very much. It's kind of, I hesitate to say plastic, like plasticine, but it has like a futuristic plasticineness to it. Like Apple has like a soft white sheen on everything it has in that sort of texture, but in red. And its edges are very round, and it has a holographic console in its hilt area. It's not shaped like a, let's say like a normal knight sword. It's cleaver-like. It's kind of got the silhouette of like the Buster sword, but scaled down and has these little spires that come out and all in red. And we would later find out that a beam of energy comes out like between them, and then there's like a hologram in the handle area, above the handle area, and then there's of course a red grip. It's a funny looking tool.
Well, I was gonna say, you mentioned the word tool there, and I don't know what your experience is with the Kingdom Hearts games at all. Have you played those?
I played most of the first one, and I remember very little in the way of lore.
Okay. There's multiple times where I get a Kingdom Hearts inspired feeling from these games, and we'll get into that a little bit more once we kind of dissect other things. But the idea of maybe when we went through the 90s era of everybody's got big swords, and I think in the 2000s there was a transition to people using tools as weapons. So it's like, yeah, you can hit monsters with whatever you're carrying, but it has to be about something more. And so with Kingdom Hearts, you have the key blade. It's like, yeah, you hit monsters with it, but its real function is to open and close these doorways to different worlds. And so that's kind of, like you said, it looks like more than a sword. I get the feeling that this thing is not just the best way to murder people. It has a bigger significance for the overall plot.
That's a fascinating take, Nate.
As things move forward, we got away from the giant swords. Like, the bigger the sword is, the better formula in the RPG scene. So, yeah, go ahead. Chapter 1.
Oh, sure. Well, so we start Chapter 1 with a cutscene, and it is a legend. It is an origin story for the world. It starts with a shot of a primordial ocean, and then a narrator explains to us the nature of the world, where at first there was nothing but this ocean, and then there were two titans, Bionis and Mechanis, just eternally entangled in a fight between one another, and we get these close-up shots of these enormous... They look like enormous robots, although one looks a little more organic than the other, and they have these enormous weapons, and they're like knee deep in this primordial ocean or something like that, and they're swinging these mighty weapons. One of them is I'll say a more conventional blade made out of stone or metal, and the other one has a large energy sword.
Yes.
And we get a close-up of what I believe is Bionis's energy sword shearing off a shoulder pad or something like that from Mechanis. And so maybe things are escalating now that we're watching the scene here. More parts are coming off of each, and then they stop. It seems like time sort of stops there, and then the narrator says that these titans are now lifeless, and in the positions they're in their lifelessnesses, they both have their weapons striking one another.
Yeah.
Making contact with one another. They're frozen in that position. And then we fast forward through time, and we're in a war zone.
The biggest note of a difference between, and again, I'm going to bring up the Xeno legacy here as we work through things, because that's interesting. That's interesting to me. I think the biggest difference here is this is very clear exposition from the start. No vague imagery of things we don't understand. So if you think to the ship scene of Gears, there's a lot of babble, that you can only make sense of at the end of the game.
Tower of Babel.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's funny. That's funny that you say that, because it becomes literally a Tower of Babel, the very thing you were looking at the beginning of the game. So I think that's, to me, I find that to be a very anime convention of just dropping someone into a world in the midst of everybody having deep knowledge of things and not really having a person as the player's avatar to kind of pick up on some of this stuff. They just start talking. They just start doing stuff as if you have lived there for 100 years. The same thing with Xenosaga. Starts out with people unearthing a giant golden key card out of the sea. This game, with the exposition, it's funny because I can clearly tell what's happening in this one just by looking at it, to where maybe I didn't need the exposition this time, and it could have been left a little bit more mysterious, but they said, no, we're going to make sure you know what's going on. So I kind of simultaneously appreciate it, but I also feel like, hey guys, you didn't do this last time. You can't change the past, but it's kind of a funny juxtaposition for me that I kind of visually just understood what was going on with this one. And then I'm not sure if the pan out to where you see the giant robots and then it zooms into like the individual locations on the robots happens in that scene or later. It might happen after the battle that we see shortly here. But I remember when I heard about this game 10 or so years ago, remember hearing the kind of people talking about like, oh, you're fighting on top, the whole world is on top of a giant robot or a giant god being or something. And I remember thinking like, there's no way that they can execute that satisfyingly, because video games have limitations, and every time they try and do something grand like that, it kind of falls flat. And I was actually surprised when I saw that pan out of like, wow, they actually did a really good job. This looks like a place where people live, but it also is, it totally is a part of this thing's body, and I see the connection there.
I was getting a sense of that too.
Yeah, that was pretty satisfying. As far as what you mentioned with one of them is like more of a biological titan, and the other one is mechanical. I think we can kind of dial back to Xenogears with Deus being a hybrid combination of technology and organic matter. Not only were they developing nanomachines and different technological parts and recovering things as part of their plans, but they were also experimenting on biological beings that would become parts for God, so to speak. So I can see where we're kind of touching on some of those same themes again of the relationship of organic to non-organic, and them being at war with each other.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we're almost certainly going to be grappling with that. And those mechanisms and organisms at war with each other is what we see in the very next shot. The narrator in the primordial ocean takes us to this new time, perhaps more recent, in which we're in a battlefield and there are humans, although they go by a different name for their race. I'm forgetting what it is now.
OMS,
HOMS, that's right.
Yeah.
OMS. Sounds like isn't like a unit of...
I think they are trying to say the H, but the accent sometimes chop it off.
Sure.
Yeah. So I think they are saying it, but our Midwestern accent brains probably are hearing it less than we would hope to.
Soldiers racing one way, racing the other. They've got rifles. They've got shields with these large knives at the, blades at the end of them. And they're fighting these mechons, which appear to be a race of mechanical monsters. And they're kind of insect-like, but some of them have these gilded edges to them where they like gleam gold. They have a primordialness look to them, but they also have an advanced, highly technologically evolved look to them as well. And they're fighting, and people are getting blown up, and machines are getting destroyed. And we cut to our first character, a soldier named Dunban, a soldier, and he's holding that red sword, and he ducks behind an obstacle from all the bullets and such, and he's talking with another man named Dixon. And first of all, we'll talk about Dunban. He's a young man. He's got long, dark hair. He's handsome, clean-shaven, and he's got the red sword.
Yeah, he's a young man, but he's also, when you think of the Japanese market, they like their protagonists really young. So he, from their perspective, would probably come off more as the grizzled veteran, or he's got a little bit of facial hair, he's got long hair, he's got some more harsh features to him. I think for the Japanese player, they're going to think this guy has seen some shit. He's seen more than his share of battles, whereas the main protagonist, he's got a very traditional JRPG look to him where you can kind of see yourself in his shoes, at least for the target audience of that game. I'm
Definitely.
35 at this point. I might identify with more of a Dunban myself.
Yeah, when I look at Dixon, I do not see myself as a blonde mustachioed headband wearing biker boy, but he seems like a nice enough guy. He could be a friend of Dunban's, a mentor. It's hard to tell, although almost certain there's like a generational difference in their ages between them. And his language that he's using to Dunban is kind of like looking after him. He tells him, your body can't take any more of the Monado. And Dunban says, I'm still in control. And there's also there's a third character too, and I forget his name, but he's the sad-faced Gomer Pyle motherfucker. And I don't know.
He's got beady little eyes, so he's got something going on inside that head of his.
He's got beady eyes. He's has bags under his eyes. He looks like a shell-shocked, war-weary soldier that just wants to get the heck out of this hot zone, and I can hardly blame him because looks like people are dying all over the place. But Dunban's like, sad-faced boy says, hey, no, we should get out of here. And Dunban like flashes a look at him and says, oh, we can stay here and kill them all, or something to that effect. Something that's like the last thing this guy wants to hear is, or we can be heroes and kill everything.
Yeah, and it's like that outlook of maybe after you've fought enough battles and you've been through this so many times, you lose that feeling of like, oh, if I just get through this one, it'll make everything better. And so maybe Dixon is more the guy that it's like, I just want to go out in a blaze of glory and do what I can for the next generation. Instead of being in the mindset of self-preservation, he is more in the mindset of like, I'm part of this machine and I just got to do my part.
Right. And they engage some mechons, and we get our first taste of battle. It's a little simplistic at this point. We're auto-attacking, and I don't know if we're playing with any abilities just yet, but we're dealing damage to these mechons, and Dixon's with us, and I think our third man is there too, and we're wielding the Monado. Oh, hold on here. I have to take a step back, my goodness. That quote, your body can't take any more of the Monado, and I'm still in control, coming back from Dunban. What we're learning is that there's a sort of maybe a spiritual or physical toll that wielding the Monado takes.
Yes.
But don't know much about the extent of what that means just yet, but I'm certain that we'll get farther into it as the story plays out.
And that's an element too, I think, again, to kind of look at the source culture or exposure the writers have had to different stories. I think that's a positive element that writers have started using in Japan in the last 10 to 15 years is when you have something that has power, you have to have a drawback to it or a limitation or some sort of cost, because otherwise you get yourself into what I call the Goku problem of you create this character that has overwhelming power, and then for the story to be interesting, you need to constantly think of ways for that power to be taken away. So like, oh, he's traveling on a ship, or he's in a a vat of healing ointments, or he has a heart condition or whatever it is. It's like you constantly need to take that person out of the story because they would just fix everything. I think that's a very positive element to create this dichotomy of the Monado has a cost to it. It has a toll. So you're going to, maybe if Dunban doesn't learn it, we, the player, are going to have to learn balance with this item and not to just use it to save the world immediately.
Right. Although that is what Dunban is very enthusiastic about. And I think the way in which the scene completes is we get a few battles in here, and then we're confronted with a stronger Mechon, and Dunban overexerts himself, and he gets injured. The extent of the injury is not very obvious in this scene, but I think he's got to be dragged away by Dixon and the third guy. I'm forgetting precisely how that scene ends. But the taste in my mouth was that our hero has been injured. Unclear whether that was from the Monado or from the forces, the Mechons. And that's kind of how the intro ends.
Yeah. And a couple notes I have when looking at this scene is like the Mechon, for example, their design, at first they kind of fulfill that menacing threat that you don't care about watching a dozen of them be slaughtered in your first tutorial battle. But as I look more at their design, they have this, I would say, like Victorian clockwork design to them in a way.
Yeah,
to where it comes off as more of an intelligence behind them. So if we were to say, like, I just got done rewatching the whole Matrix trilogy, right? In the physical world, the machines do themselves no favors by creating the most terrible looking outer shells for themselves of all time. They look horrifying and menacing and like straight out of your nightmares, right?
Right.
But when I look at the Mechon, they actually have like a beauty to them, or something like a quality that says that whoever's the brain behind their operation, they understand something about quality and a beauty to life.
Yeah, they have an elegance to them. They don't look like they're exhausting diesel fumes.
Yeah.
Or chugging like a traditional motor or engine. They look put together and elegant.
So knowing nothing about this game, I'm kind of interested to see, are we going to see that explored more, where there's going to be a little bit of heart and personality behind the other side of the fight.
Nate and I's first conversation was more than 2 hours in length, and so we're splitting up that conversation into 2 separate episodes. Of course, this was introductions, the title screen, and the opening scenes, and then the next episode will be the bulk of Chapter 1. Thanks for joining us. We'll catch you next time.